Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday, June 17th, West Fargo City Commission meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. At this time, would I ask everyone to please silence your cell phones? Join me for a Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner George?
Here.
Commissioner Simmons?
Here.
Commissioner Jordis?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
As the record show, all five commissioners are here. Next order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. I understand I have to recognize some of our commissioners for some discussion points. Commissioner Olson.
Request to remove item 8 from the agenda. We've received no information other than a little drawing less than 15 minutes before this commission meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Anderson, if this is one of your topic items, can you care to address that or discuss it, please?
I'm seeing a couple people in the audience that would be available to answer questions. I feel like it should be on the agenda because they showed up. If it comes to a point that another decision, once we talk about it, is reached, then, you know, such as tabling or we take action on it, I think that would be appropriate.
It's an actionable item based on how it's put on the agenda, so I think we need to have time to review it prior to hearing any discussion from anybody in the crowd.
Okay, we're going to follow this as an actionable item in order to make a decision with the commission. So do I have a motion to remove it from the agenda, item number 8?
Yes.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. It's been moved and seconded to remove the discussion item to authorize a building permit prior to the merging of two plotted lots. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion fails. The item will be left on the agenda. Is there anything else with regard to the order of the agenda?
I do, Mayor.
Commissioner Simmons.
Item number 5, the capital improvement plan, SIP. I just kind of feel that before they go through this, the 2 new commissioners should be on it. It's kind of senseless for me and Commissioner George to be on at this point. I think we need you guys to have your full commission when Dan talks about it.
All right, is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Commissioner Simmons moves to remove the capital improvement plan, item number 6, from the agenda in order for our new commissioners to be a part of that in coming meetings. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 6 is removed from the agenda.
Point of order.
Item 5.
Number 5.
Item 5.
Item number 5, my apologies. Anything else on to approve the order of the agenda? I need a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Commissioner George seconds. I have a motion and a second to approve the order of the agenda, removing item number 5. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes of June 3rd, 2024.
So moved.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. The next order of business is building permits. The building permits have been distributed and are in your packet.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permits as presented on Monday, June 17th. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next order of business is a consent agenda. At the present time, we have items A through E that are in the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve the consent agenda as distributed. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next order of business is the regular agenda. The regular agenda is a public comment period. Members of the public are allowed 2 minutes and 30 seconds to address the City Commission. We will not be taking any action on these items. We have one registered, correct? We have one person registered this evening to present from the public comment. We welcome to the podium Mr. David Withy. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. As you mentioned, my name is David Withy, 2421 McLeod Drive East. We've just enjoyed a reception about this. I want this to be on the video record. Commissioners George and Simmons, thank you for your service and leadership. It takes a lot of time to do the job, and you've each done it well. Thank you. While I'm at it, some other leaders should also be recognized. Thank you, Police Chief Nielsen. While it began with your predecessors, you continue to operate a department that puts residents first with transparency and accountability. Likewise, thank you, Fire Chief Fuller, for the same reasons. And congratulations on the 5th anniversary as an integral part of the city's government. And even though you removed it from the agenda, I'm still going to refer to it. Thank you, City Engineer Dan Hanson, for updating and for even having a capital improvement plan. Planning seems to be notably absent in some of our other city operations. It is gratifying to see in the plan a decreased reliance on specials. I once again thank Public Works Director Matt Anvik. It's been no secret, for well over a year, we've had problems with accounting software in general and utility billing in particular. It appears that there's been a lack of concern about these problems by some in the city's leadership. Fortunately for residents, Mr. Anvik was concerned and frustrated that nothing was being done. So he volunteered to Mr. Scott to take charge and find a package whose purchase the Commission approved last week. Thank you again for your leadership, Mr. Anvik, and to Mr. Scott for sending him on his way to do this. While it is easy for residents to believe there's a lack of leadership in any city, these people are evidence that there are leaders. I look forward to recognizing others in the future. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Withy. Madam Secretary, we have no additional requests for public comment. Moving on to item number 2 is a contract approval with the City of Fargo for Matt Bus for transit service. We call on Aaron Nelson, our Planning Director for the City of West Fargo. Good evening, Mr. Nelson, and welcome.
Good evening, Commissioner President and Commissioners. So item 2 is for consideration of the city's annual contract with the City of Fargo Matt Bus for ongoing transit services with the City of West Fargo. In quick summary, Matt Bus provides contract transit service to the City of West Fargo in accordance with this annual mass transit agreement. As in past years, under the terms of this agreement, Matt Bus will continue to operate portions of 2 fixed route transit lines within the City of West Fargo, as well as to provide paratransit services throughout the city. There are no changes to the transit services with this agreement. The charged rate from Matt Bus, however, the charged rates from Matt Bus, however, are increasing due to several factors, including inflation, increasing ridership, and reduced availability of federal fundings for transit. The recommended action tonight is to approve the 2024 mass transit agreement included in your meeting packet. There is a representative of Matt Bus here tonight should you have any questions for Matt Bus. Otherwise, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Commissioner Anderson.
I just have one question. You mentioned that there's no change in services. Is there any discussion ongoing currently or planned in the future for expanding services provided within West Fargo? I think there's some areas of opportunity that could be addressed.
Yep. So that is on our radar, and every 5 years, the map bus goes through their transit development plan, or their TDP, and I believe we're coming up on year number 5, if that's correct, and I'll let Cole chime in here. But in 2025, there should be some opportunity and some public input opportunities to review the transit routes within West Fargo as part of the overall map bus study. So I'll let Cole add some detail there.
Yeah, that's correct. We are actually meeting tomorrow to review the applications that we received for that transit development plan. That'll be beginning here in 2024. We are looking to have a representative from West Fargo included in that plan, so we'd be absolutely happy to take into consideration any future expansions or route redesigns that you might have.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? I have one question. Do you have any data on the ridership from West Fargo, from the various stops that you make in the community?
Yeah, just 1 second, I'll grab my data quick. So this is just very overall data for 2023. We do offer the 2 fixed route services in West Fargo. Route 20 services the older section. Route 24 is more so down by 32nd Avenue, going to the Lights area. So with that, we did see about 12,600 riders in 2023. We also do offer a paratransit service that services all of West Fargo, Fargo, Moorhead, and Delworth. With that service in 2023, we offered 7,830 rides to West Fargo residents. If you would like ridership by stop, that's absolutely something that we'd be able to provide for you as well.
Very good, thank you. This is a actionable item to approve the contract as stated, where it's $294.87 per month for fixed route service, $2.18 per ride. In 2024, the estimate is at $425,899.49. Mr. Nelson.
Quick point of clarification. I think the numbers you just cited, those are the difference between last year's contract and this year's contract.
Okay.
So a little further up in the memo here.
All right, there it is. Yep,
Yeah.
thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the contract with City of Fargo for the MAT bus service, for transit service in the city of West Fargo. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 3 is A24-16 Maple Ridge at the preserved 8th edition, a request for a variance to reduce the required minimum building control line of a COSR Cheyenne River Corridor Overlay District. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. So as was just mentioned, this is a request for the reduction of the building control line of the Cheyenne River Corridor Overlay District. A quick summary here. The building control line is located 100 feet from the established riverbank of the Cheyenne River throughout the city of West Fargo, including the extraterritorial jurisdiction. And it constitutes the minimum setback line for all buildings and development-related activity that could cause riverbank destabilization. In accordance with Section 4-431-C3 of the city ordinances, the City Commission may reduce the required building control line where it can be demonstrated through a soils analysis that soils are stable within the building control area. So such requests are handled through the variance approval process, and so for this item in particular, the request is that the City Commission reconvene as in their capacity as the city's Board of Adjustment in order to take action on this item, since it does technically follow the variance process. So with that overview here, the subject property is located at 3060 Cheyenne River Way. The applicant, Representative Chris Schuler with Century Builders, I believe is present tonight, should you have any questions for the applicant. And the specific purpose of this application is to reduce the building control line for the subject property from that standard 100 feet down to 84 feet for the purpose of construction of a single-family house. There is a house under construction on the subject property, which was found to be encroaching approximately 16 feet into the 100-foot building control line during some of their lot grading and landscaping work. And so to address the issue, the applicant has hired, or did hire Braun Intertech, which is a geotechnical engineering firm, to provide a soils analysis for the subject property in accordance with the ordinance that I stated earlier. The soils analysis is included in your meeting packet as an attachment to the staff report for additional reference. In summary, the soils analysis has found that the soils are sufficiently stable to support the house that is under construction in its location 84 feet from the riverbank. A public hearing for this request was held at the June 11th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, at which time the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend this item for approval based on the satisfactory soils analysis. So with that, the recommended motion tonight is to approve the requested 16-foot reduction to the building control line, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have for staff. And just to note again, this is a unique item, and that will ask that you reconvene in your capacity as the Board of Adjustment.
Call on Commissioner Olson first, please.
For future building along the river, is there anything that the city can do to go out and make sure before any construction starts to put up a control line so we don't have to deal with this again?
Yes, so the engineering department does go out on request to stake the location of the riverbank so that measurements can be made 100 feet back from that line. However, I believe that is kind of an at-request service. It's not something that we currently do on every single construction project, but certainly that is a good suggestion and something that we could certainly look into.
And a follow-up.
Mr. Olson has a follow-up question.
So, since we're going to allow this if we allow this variance, the city won't be held liable if something should happen to that structure, should it? Because we're allowing them to go within the 100 feet. If it passes, we're not going to be held liable because they went 16 feet too close to the river.
I guess I'll defer to the city attorney on that question.
Call on Mr. John Shockley, a city attorney.
Commission President, Commissioner Olson, that's a great question. That's why we require the soils analysis to make sure that there's sufficient reason to grant the variance.
Mayor,
Please, Commissioner Simmons.
thank you. Just a comment, we bought some houses out over the years that have been too close, and the first thing they say is, well, you gave us a permit. So I have a difficult time approving these when knowing that that's what they're going to say.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any additional questions of Mr. Nelson? My understanding is that we will gavel out of the regular meeting and convene. All right. We close the regular agenda meeting for the city of West Fargo. We reconvene as the City Board of Adjustment, which is the City Commission, for the purpose of action on this item. What is your pleasure, Commissioners?
Make a motion to deny.
Commissioner Simmons moves to deny. Is there a second, please? Is there a second, please? Motion fails due to the lack of a second.
I have a question.
Please, Commissioner Olson.
If we should deny it, what happens then to the structure that's there?
Grandfathered in, I would assume. Mr. Nelson or Mr. Shockley?
Yeah, so the structure was permitted, and so it would be allowed to be constructed, and it would be essentially in a non-conforming state. And so the applicant is requesting the variance in order to make everything conform to our current ordinances. However, if it was to be denied, it would be a
If it fails
non-conforming
or whatever, yep.
structure essentially that exists. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Which there's some real interesting state legislation as well as municipal codes with regarding non-conforming. Representative Koppelman is in the room, and I've testified a number of times on this in the, with him and his father's committee. So that it does create some potential issues, no question about it. Commissioner Simmons.
So this is basically kind of build and ask for forgiveness later then? Is that where we're going with this?
You said that. I did not say that.
Okay.
Well, we had a motion failed to deny. Is there another motion on the floor, please? Commissioner George.
Quick, okay, I know you said this, just please, just one more time. So if this gets approved, the city would not be held liable if the bank sloughs away. It's on them, right?
Commissioner George, that is correct because we would be requiring the soils test to support the variance. And candidly, this is after the fact when it should have been caught that it was within the building setback line. The applicant has been very cooperative in seeking the variance. The variance allows us assurance that the soils can support the structure.
I think
And it was a small and
My
small
understanding,
introduction into the building
My-
setback line.
my apologies. My understanding was that in 2016, this changed? Is that correct?
The building control line, the River Corridor Overlay Zoning District, I don't know the year that was
Okay.
created off the top of my head.
So, but they moved to a 150-year mark rather than, wasn't it previously less than that? It's always been 150?
Good evening, Mr. President. No, the river setback requirement has been 100 feet from the established riverbank, and that has been since the inception of the ordinance. It's often confused with Fargo or Cass County's river setback requirements. They use a setback from the center line of the river. Our ordinance is 100 feet from the setback of the established riverbank. There's additional language that the city engineer is who establishes that location.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. If we were to pass this, John, can we at least get a letter from the owners saying that they're not going to sue us if something should happen? Is that asking too much too?
We could include the requirement that they waive any claims against the city with your motion.
I just think we should have something if we were to pass this, that we have that.
Okay, well, maybe I'll make the motion to approve then with that letter, or how would you say that, that they wouldn't be suing the city, something like that?
With the requirement of a letter stating that they recognize there is a variance on this bill. A motion.
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Commissioners.
Now we have to go back into the regular.
Yes. We now are adjourning from the city's Board of Adjustment. We are now back into the regular agenda, and your West Fargo City Commission is moving on to item number 4. Renaissance Zone Application, Red River Refrigeration. We call on Casey Sanders Berglund, our Economic Development Manager. Good evening, Ms. Berglund, and welcome.
Good evening, President Commission Tardis, Commissioners. Tonight, I have Red River Refrigeration as a Renaissance Zone applicant. So just to, I've shared all the details in the staff report, but just to give some highlights, this business has been in West Fargo for 30 years. They are looking to expand their operations. Kind of the instigator, I guess you will, in regards to this expansion actually came up during the pandemic when they recognized some opportunities and things that maybe were shifting in the industry for them. So they're looking to add to their current facility, which would consist of 4,125 square foot, a pre-engineered pre-engineered metal building. So essentially, when we take a look at what this project looks like, they are in the current Renaissance zone that you can see on the map in the staff report. I don't know, Emily, you can scroll to that, or I guess I can. I'm just not great with, thank you. And then when you look at the urban renewal plan that the city of West Fargo has, looking at the eligibility requirements for this project is only eligible for, I shouldn't say only, but is eligible for the 50 to 74% true and full value qualification. So that is a qualification that we hold at the city of West Fargo, and that what that means is that they can receive up to 50% of their total property tax, not just the expansion, total property tax for up to 5 years. So with that, if you look at the current building value is at $775,000. Their future building value is estimated to be $1.285 million. The difference being a little over $500,000. Then when we kind of look at the property tax, currently they pay $11,259. Their future property tax is estimated to be $18,661. So if you kind of look at, what I like to kind of look at when we're looking at this is the improvement value. So if we were to take and look at the future property tax, that's the $18,661. What we would be incentivizing is only 50% of that. That's what they're eligible for based on our program. So they'd be eligible for a total in 5 years of $46,652.50. So at kind of the last page of this, I like to look at with the incentive in 5 years, they would still be paying in 50%. So the city of West Fargo would still receive $9,330 annually, whereas without the incentive, we would receive $11,259 annually. And at that year 6, essentially, you can see, I should say in between 6 and 7, you can see that there's a pretty clear break even. So at year 7, the total tax revenue that the city of West Fargo would receive, well, I shouldn't say all taxing entities, not the city of West Fargo to be clear, would be $83,974. And that's the total within 7 years, in comparison to, without the incentive, $78,813. So just to kind of give you a picture of that, though sales tax is often a conversation when we look at incentives such as this, it is a component. I didn't break those down like I often do because it's not a high component with this application. In addition, the ideal is that this business would attract an additional anywhere from 10 to 15 jobs. However, we wanted to be conservative with that, considering just the workforce right now. This is a challenging industry to guarantee that we would be able to increase that many jobs. So with that, I'd stand for questions, or I have a couple business owner representatives here in the audience as well.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner George.
Okay, so on your chart here, you're 7 years out. With the incentive, they're paying in $83,974 over 4 years? That's what they'd be paying in, and then without 78,000?
Correct.
Okay, so why, they're actually paying in more with the incentive, is that correct?
Correct.
So why did they want it? Is it because it's less at the beginning, or like what does this?
That's correct.
That's it.
Yep, so what it does is it allows them to do their expansion, and complete that fit up. It allows them to get that footing and do what they need to do to make that expansion happen. And then in the end, no matter what, they will, if you'll see, in the end, they will no matter what increase to 18. Okay, so let me go back to be clear. Let's say they don't receive this incentive and they don't come here, or they don't expand here, you'll see that they'll stay at their current property tax. If they do receive the incentive, they plan to move forward, and so their property tax will increase. So if their property tax increases, then no matter what, they would end up paying more.
Okay.
Is there any other clarification?
I
I want to make sure that
got
I'm
the
being clear.
idea.
Okay.
So, okay, thanks.
Did you have something, Commissioner Olson?
I was just going to reiterate what you just said,
Oh.
because without the incentive, there won't be an expansion, more than likely.
And
More
thus
than
a
likely.
lack of increased property value.
Right. So that's why
At this level.
that's why the taxes over 7 years is 78,000. For the first 5 years, yes, they have a huge savings. You know, you look at it, it's only 200 or over $2,000 per year, but their increased value is up to 1.2 million versus the 775 on the property. So it doesn't look like a huge savings, but if they did the expansion, they'd be paying 18,661 for all 7 years. So that is a huge savings of $9,000 a year for 5 years. So
I'd add that the goal of the city creating a Renaissance Zone program is to retain, in my mind, is to retain those individuals. I mean, they've been a business here for 30 years. We're oftentimes trying to attract new big businesses that want to come and be part of our community and our business community. This is an opportunity for us to recognize that a business has been here for 30 years and they've participated and have grown in 30 years, and recognize that they are in a part of our community that needs some, maybe for lack of a better term, some TLC, and so they recognize that this is an opportunity to apply for a little bit of a break while they look at this opportunity for themselves to expand.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the Renaissance Zone application for Red River Refrigeration. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? I too have known this management team for the years. It changes, but they continue to be a great community partner and great leaders in our community's churches, as well as in the business community. It's a great company to have in our community. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Ms. President.
Thank you.
Again, I'll remind the public that item number 5 was removed. So we are now on item number 6, a utility rate increase informational presentation. There's no action on this item this evening. We're going to call on Mr. Matt Andrick, the Public Works Director. Good evening, Mr. Andrick, and welcome.
Good evening, Commissioner President, Commissioners. I know it's kind of odd timing to bring this forward, right into kind of the transition between the two commissions, but given the timing and trying to get this information out in front of everybody before we get into kind of the whole budget season is kind of the point. Something we want to talk, or I guess nobody really wants to talk about, is the water and sewer rate increases. And what is really bringing this forward is a proposed increase that Fargo has brought forward for both water and wastewater that we sent to them. So just want to give you a brief history of where we're at and how we got to this point, being connected to Fargo with both water and wastewater. For the water, 2014, 2015 is when we started looking at options on what we can do for the city. At the time, they looked at building their own water treatment plant. There were some issues with cost. It was estimated at $126 million at the time. And then being able to get enough water into that site. The other one was drill some more wells and rehabilitate the well sites that we had. That wasn't feasible based on an aquifer study that was done at that time. The other one was to make the connection to Fargo and purchase our water from the City of Fargo, which in the end was the cheapest option to go with. And that was the agreement was signed in 2015, and in 2016 was when we first began purchasing water from Fargo. Our first increase after 2016 was actually in January of 2023. It was the first increase that they actually brought forward for us. The next increase again now is in 2025, is what they're proposing. Wastewater is following kind of a similar path that water did, but they started looking a little bit later in 2016, 2017, and exploring the same options. You know, we can construct our own wastewater treatment plant, expand the lagoons, or we connect to Fargo. In 2017, that was the agreement was signed with Fargo, and in late 2019 was the first time we started sending the wastewater to Fargo. And with that, part of that sending the water to Fargo was the decommissioning of lagoons that we have, and that was started in 2021. Back in 2019, A2S Nexus was commissioned to do a rate study, and that was presented in May 18th of 2020. Some of the items that they're hitting, was just the forecasted revenue requirements, kind of funding policy review, cost analysis, rate surveys, alternate revenue models, and, just where we need to be at, to fund utilities in the future. I guess the next one here was what they came back with the rate study. We changed to the different fees, that was a fixed fee a month for a meter charge, and then more of a volumetric with a few tiers. As you can see on the bottom there, they were kind of going about a 3% increase every year. So if you're looking at this, and had we followed this plan, we'd have been 3% per year all the way up until this year. So you're looking at a little bit more. They had $8.10, and for your 3/4 inch meter, which we're still at $7.25 today. A little bit higher, $7.90 for volumetric, and we're at $7.40. So we followed a little bit with that rate increase in 2023, but for the most part, we haven't raised any of those rates since 2020. The wastewater was similar. We switched from just a flat fee to just a fixed rate of $9, and then $4 per thousand gallons. And on the bottom, you can see those increases were a little bit higher at 10% per year, from 2020 all the way on. And that was just to start factoring in sending the more amount of wastewater to Fargo and to cover that cost. And so far, we have not raised sewer or wastewater since 2020. It was approved at the May 18th meeting, and that was what the rates were, is what we covered. A lot has happened since those meetings. I think it was approved, as presented in 2020, but then nobody could see, kind of foresee what COVID would do. 2021, everybody wasn't quite sure where we're going, and one of the things is you really don't want to raise rates on people that were struggling at the time. A lot of people were losing their jobs. We didn't know quite where we're going. 2022, we were looking at, sanitation rates and talking about that, and then we got into water rate. So there's a lot of just factors where we just didn't get these increases done and bring them forward, which now just kind of compounds it, and now we're going to have to be looking at doing something here in 2025. This just kind of covers that 2023 water increase, which was basically a pass-through. The City of Fargo increased the cost of water by 40 cents per 1,000 gallons, which went from $3.25 to $3.65, which we just passed that 40 cents along, kind of just staying the same, and went from $7 per 1,000 gallons to $7.40. This next slide here is the proposed rates that we're getting from Fargo. They're proposing in 2025, it would be $4.42 per 1,000, and 2026 would be $4.98. They also just proposed a 2-year fixed rate of $4.70, which in the long run would be the better choice to go with that. And then we're kind of locked in for 2 years with the assumption we'll probably get another increase coming in 27. Being that we haven't really had much increases since 2026, yeah, this is a little bit of a jump, but since we've only had one increase in, 8 years, that's not too bad. And just the cost of everything, the chemicals, everything is going up. For wastewater, they're looking at $3.65 per thousand in 25, $3.77 in 26, and then they offered a fixed rate of $3.71. So that'd be an increase of about 71 cents per thousand going into 2025, which kind of we cover this. But one of the things to note with that water increase, that $4.70 per thousand actually includes the Red River Valley Water Supply Project debt obligation. They've actually started putting that into those rates that they're selling, so it's more of a volumetric instead of just a lump sum fee. I think in that first year it was like 9 cents per thousand gallon, and it kind of goes up from there as the years progress, which is, I guess, in the long-term thinking, we're almost built out for the city of West Fargo of what we have for water rights. The lagoons is the last area pretty much that we have water rights to. Everything past that is in our extraterritorial is Southeast Casserole Water District. Sorry, I keep mixing the two up. So as the city grows, a lot more of that volumetric will go on to the Casserole water users instead of the city of West Fargo, ones that are purchasing that. So they would be paying their water fees to a different source than what we would be taking. So that by doing that, it just kind of spreads it out on who's using the most water is the one who's paying the most for it. I did cover that. The current wastewater rate is $3 and it goes up to $3.71. So yeah, that just goes back from 2016 to 2024. We've only had one water rate increase, and we have not had any sewer increases at this time. So just some items to consider that we wanted to bring forth is kind of get the commission's idea, and we'll probably talk about this in budget meetings too, is just what do we want for our operating reserve levels? Most it's pretty standard between 1 and 3 months, some say, no less than 45 days. Where do we want to be at with that as a city? And then it makes it a lot easier to set our rates for that. There's also a capital reserve if we want to do an emergency reserve fund, rate stabilization. If we want to start doing some of the rehabilitation projects funded by these rate fees, what are we looking at? How much are we going to spend per year? And that's just some things that I kind of have in the back of the mind that we should probably start thinking about having a policy, and then it's easier to set our rates based on where we need to be in the next few years with the reserves. I didn't kind of cover that one. Where do we want to be if we want to do some small maintenance projects? And we want to take that multi-year plan approach, kind of like I presented with the sanitation, or we want to take it more of a year-to-year. And then there's also, do we want to use a consultant to do another rate study, or just upgrade the study of 2020 that we did, for what Nexus did in 2020, and maybe we can reach out to them and have them get some of those numbers up to date. So those are just kind of questions to consider going forward as we start meeting a little bit more and talking about possible rate increases. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Advick? Mr. Advick, I'd ask that your data be sent to Commissioner-elect Zundell and Commissioner-elect Jorgensen. Make sure that they have this or have the link to get to it.
Yep.
Please.
We'll send that out.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? This is informational only. Thank you, Mr. Advick.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was
Mr. George?
just real quick on here. I know I won't be the one voting on this, but with this, it would be nice to see, where the water rates currently sit, like in the funds, where are we at? What have we spent? It would just be nice to see that too on the information.
That will be a question that will be asked, yes. And there's something important about this, and I hope that everybody grasps that these are the increases that we're getting. This is our cost. So the last page that Mr. Anvik had up just prior to the questions there, thank you. Oh, back one more, down, there you go. These are important questions that we have to discuss and we have to understand, because if we're going to sell some of these utility bonds, we have to show that there's enough. If we have a major project, we have to show that we have enough revenue coming in to cover the bonds. And if we continue to only move at the cost, that isn't going to happen. So there's some hard answers that we have to look for and questions that we have to answer. Thank you, Mr. Anvik.
Yes.
Item number 7 is a recommendation action for establishment of the possibility of community gardens. We're going to call on Commissioner Mandy George. Commissioner?
Yes, thank you. So several weeks ago, we brought this up to commission, and we had a vote as far as doing something as a city to work towards developing a community garden. It felt like there was a lot of great support from that. I know I've heard a lot of people in the community have support for this. With community gardens, it provides a social engagement, a sense of community, social interactions, economic as far as addressing food insecurity and affordability, the health aspect, physical activity, stress relief, healthy food. So what we're bringing up tonight is to what level does the commission want to get involved on this? So Aaron Nelson has been working on this project, so I'd like to bring him forward to the podium, and he has a few different options to present to the commission, so I guess I'll let him present those, and then as a commission, I guess I'd like to talk about which options we like, what we want to do, and then hopefully move forward on a vote from there.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Nelson, welcome.
Thank you. Can you pull up the packet? So, yeah, as Emily's pulling up the memo here, thanks, Mr. George, and you know, I was asked to provide the commission with a summary of some staff findings and recommendations, which are included in the form of a memo that's attached in the meeting packet here. And so, at a very high level, I'll just maybe walk through the contents of that memo and introduce kind of 3 options as staff sees it anyway, in terms of some alternative options should the city commission wish to take some action on this. So the memo itself is broken up into 3 different sections. The first section is just some general findings and observations from other communities, especially within the region here. The second section outlines several items of consideration that city commission should think about prior to or along with the establishment of of some action in this regard. And lastly, section 3 contains those 3 options that I mentioned in terms of alternative approaches to take to this topic. So just to start with some findings from other communities here, just to start with some definitions, if you will. There are really 2 different types of community gardens when people think of community gardens. The first is what's referred to as a communal garden, which is one large garden that multiple people garden together in a group. These are typically things you might find in a church or a nonprofit organization where that organization and its members all garden that large garden together. And then the other type is called an allotment garden, or referred to as an allotment garden. And that's the type of community garden in which small plots of land are staked out and then individually rented out to individuals or small groups for those individuals to garden on their own. And so in this case of public community gardens, more often than not, you'll find the allotment type gardens. Those communal gardens are more typical of nonprofits and religious organizations, things like that. So in the case of allotment gardens, however, there is local government involvement, or when there is local government involvement, it is typically a park district or a park department, if a city has a park department, or to a lesser extent, a local public health department or authority, acting in partnership with local nonprofits that are involved in community gardens or have an interest in gardening or some of those civic engagement type events. But it is often common for these allotment type gardens to be located on public land, and so that is one of the most common involvements of a local government jurisdiction, is to provide the land for the community gardens, regardless of how they're kind of managed on a day-to-day time period. In addition to providing the land, it's also common for the local government to provide things like tilling services in the spring and in the fall, just to till up the land and kind of get it ready for spring planting. Also providing water, parking, access to restrooms, some of those kind of accessory facilities for a community garden. Those are oftentimes what the local government will kind of bring to the table. It's kind of pretty split in terms of how often or not the local government is involved in the actual management of the sites. Sometimes it might be the local government that's renting out the lots and managing any revenues that come from the rental, managing who gets those rentals, how they get the rentals. Alternatively, it is also common for a nonprofit organization to partner with a local government entity in order to kind of handle the ongoing maintenance and operation of those community gardens. So that's just some general findings, and then a little on top of page 2, there is kind of a summary of some of those local cities that we've kind of taken a look at. A lot of this information, I will say, comes from the Cascade Community, I'm getting this wrong, I know, the, you might have to help me out, Commissioner George, the Community
The Cascade.
Food Systems
Now too.
Committee.
The health.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Market Pass Public Health.
There we go.
Thank you. So they do have kind of a white paper on community gardens, which does have a lot of great information as well, and is also a great resource should you have any additional interest in the topic. But for example, Bismarck Parks and Recreation District, they provide parkland, water, tilling services for rented allotment gardens. They do partner with a nonprofit organization called Bismarck Community Gardens, which manages 5 different gardens throughout the community. And then the Park District does manage 1 garden on their own, which is actually on county land, is our understanding. And the City of Grand Forks, their Public Health Department manages 1 community garden on city-owned land. That's through a grant from the North Dakota Department of Health and Human Services. Additionally, their Park District owns and operates a community allotment garden of 67 plots on the north side of town there. In Fargo, the Fargo Park District owns and operates a community allotment garden of 200 plots up at the Yonker Farm site. In addition to that, they do provide land for public gardens adjacent to downtown near the river, but they don't actually manage those gardens, is our understanding. The City of Moorhead takes a slightly different approach, where they offer a $500 grant to organizations willing to establish a community garden on private property. And then in Sioux Falls, the SDSU Extension Office, in partnership with their nonprofit Master Gardeners Group, manages 7 community gardens, provide water tilling. That effort is also supported by a larger kind of public health effort that does involve partnerships with local businesses, nonprofits, as well as the City of Sioux Falls. So just to kind of give you a flavor, every community is a little different in how they approach the topic here. In terms of the next section of the memo here, there's some considerations for West Fargo or any city looking to stand up a community garden. One is it's always good to start with a purpose. Commissioner George mentioned several of those in the introduction there. So I won't get into that. Number 2, community engagement and support. So what level of public support is there or demand for community gardens is there in the community? How does that relate to other city services? Is there a support from other community partners and organizations and volunteers that would be active in the conversation? So there is somewhat of a common theme here, and it does take partnerships. Number 3, site selection and design, identification of suitable land, whether that's enough area, access to parking, access to water, some zoning and legal compliance. Is it allowed by the zoning district? Are there zoning amendments that need to take place in order to allow these in more districts? Are there concerns from potential neighbors of these gardens? Site plan layout, how are they laid out? Are there paths, access to water, those types of things? Number 4, funding and resources. What amount of city funding and resources should be allocated to community gardens? Also related to that, city staff time. Is there a need for additional staff if the city were to manage the community gardens, for example? Management and oversight in terms of who will manage and oversee the community gardens on a day-to-day basis. For allotment gardens, who's taking care of the rentals, who's kind of mediating disputes, some of those more day-to-day type things. Then lastly, risk management in terms of addressing safety and security, ensuring that it's located in a safe location, and then implementing measures perhaps to protect against vandalism and theft, which is sometimes can be the case. So lastly, the recommendations. Like I mentioned, there's kind of 3 different options that staff laid out here. There's certainly a whole host of additional ways to approach this, but these are just 3 that kind of staff would throw out there for consideration. So option 1 is the city to act as lead facilitator in discussions with partner organizations. And so this would, likely look like city staff reaching out to West Fargo Park District, Fargo Cast Public Health, representatives from, local food and gardening organizations, MetroCog's Cascade Food Commission, and any other, stakeholders or entities that might be interested in having some conversations with the city in terms of what each partner could bring to the table. Again, it's very common for cities or park districts, land being one of the main necessities for this type of thing. That could be something that the city brings to the table if there's a organization that might be interested in kind of operating it. So the intent here would be to have some exploratory discussions to see, maybe gauge the level of interest from some of those partner agencies, and then to potentially chart a path forward from there. Option 2 is that if there is no interest maybe from those partner organizations and the city's looking to go at this alone, then it might be worthwhile for the city to consider a request for proposals or issuing an RFP to see if there's any nonprofit organizations or other partner entities that might be interested in partnering with the city. So if the city were to, have some land that's available, if there's a nonprofit that wants to take over the day-to-day operations, if they want to, they could be enticed perhaps by receiving the revenues from rentals, but certainly there would be some expenses there in terms of operating or managing the gardens as well. And then lastly, option 3 would be to establish a grant program to incentivize the creation of community gardens within the city by others. And so this would be potentially similar to the city's recent child care grant program, in which the city maybe offers some seed money or seed funding to organizations willing to put in the time and effort to build the facilities necessary. And all three of these could be, you could mix and match a lot of these things as well. And so these aren't the only 3 options, but just 3 that we would toss out there for consideration. So that's kind of a summary of the initial findings. I will say I am by no means an expert on this topic, and so I will do my best to answer any questions you have, though.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Commissioner George, you have something additional?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, just to sum it up, so I know staff, option 1 is the staff's recommendation as far as their one that they would prefer to move forward on, and reading through these myself, that was my own as well. Being my vision or my thought with this is that the city would provide the land and a source of water, but that would not manage the rest of it and would step aside from that. And I know there's been organizations that have expressed interest. I believe it's called Growing Together. Was that what it's called? That has expressed some interest in it. So it's something like that is what I envision. So personally, I see option 1, but I figure we don't leave it open to discussion with the commission as far as what the commission sees.
Thank you. Questions of Commissioner George or Mr. Nelson regarding this topic?
Mayor?
Please, Commissioner Olson.
Well, with option 1, as it's laid out here, it doesn't really decide who's providing what, as far as providing water or spring or fall tillage. It's just to try to see if there's a...
Explore it further.
Explore
Yes.
it.
Yep.
Because that's my concern, as to who's going to till it? Who's going to clean up the mess that's out there? What happens if the water's left on and it goes unattended for 48 hours, and then the city's, up, who's going to pay that bill? Are we just going to let it go? Those are my concerns, things like that. Because, and then vandalism too. You have pranksters out there to go out there and smash all the pumpkins and wreck the tomato plants and things like that, which we don't want to happen, but it's an easy target. So I think option 1 is best, just to explore it and start from there. And then if that doesn't work, option 2. That doesn't work, option 3. It's a good idea.
Yeah, with the food sustainability aspect of it in itself is very positive. And of course, Lutheran Church of the Cross and Gate City Bank are doing an amazing job with what they do on their Eats West Fargo, I believe is what it's called. It's an amazing program. We have a very engaged civic group right now in Civic West. We have a very involved and engaged state president lives in West Fargo, and the regional president lives in West Fargo of AARP. So I think the idea of, exploring it further, there's some great potential as to some additional community partners that might have some suggestions or opportunity to to address some of the concerns that Mr. Nelson has outlined here, so. Because it's going to involve staff time, I would like a motion that we continue with this consideration and the search for answers for some of these questions, please.
I move we go with option 1.
Second.
Commissioner Olson moves that we go with option 1, and Commissioner George seconds. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Commissioner George and Mr. Nelson. Item number 9 is the salary study update. We call on our Human Resource Manager and Dustin Scott, our City Administrator. Sir Goshovic.
Number 8.
What did I do it again? My apologies.
You want a short meeting, but
I apologize. I marked it as moved. My apologies to you, Commissioner. Item number 8 is a request for the City Commission to authorize an issuance of a building permit prior to the merging of 2 plotted lots. Mr. Robert Anderson, Commissioner, City of West Fargo. My apologies, sir.
Yeah, no problem. So I had a couple residents reach out. They are working on a project on their home, and they're looking to move rapidly on the project, and they own 2 adjoining lots. And there's some considerations that need to be made with their building permits and and the lot lines and stuff. And Aaron Nelson has a lot more detail than I have on this, as there's been some discussion over the last few weeks about this, from what I gather. So I'd like him to share what he can. And I know there's some folks in the audience too, if there are any other questions.
All right, thank you. So I'll do my best to kind of set the stage here with what I understand the citizen request to be, and then I'll be here for any additional questions. But in quick summary,
Where are we at there, Mr. Nelson?
we are at 1444 River Street, so just south of 13th Avenue, west of Cheyenne Street. So we're looking at a single-family home with the red roof here. To the west is the Cheyenne River. To the east is mostly vacant lot with a little garage on it. So the owner of the home owns the home itself, and then the vacant lot to the east, which is the one that I just clicked on. So they own both properties. Mr. Ben Koppelman is here representing the owners of the home. He's working on a reconstruction and remodel project for the home. In summary, the southern little portion of the house is being demolished, and in its place there is a building addition or a building expansion that would be roughly on the southeast corner of the lot that the house is currently on. And so one of the issues that they're running into is that the proposed addition would be, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but roughly 2.5 feet, I believe, from the property line located between the lot that the house is on and the vacant lot. And so what they would like to do is to merge those 2 lots into one lot in order to meet the applicable setbacks for the zoning district that the house is located within. And so I believe prior to roughly 2015, it's my understanding that it was a fairly simple process just to get the tax parcels merged for the purposes of building across a lot line or next to a lot line. However, in 2015, there was an ordinance amendment to the subdivision ordinance that outlines it basically says if you want to merge parcels, you can follow the retracement plat process in order to replat the 2 lots into one lot. And so that process does take time. It does require a surveyor to draft a plat of the property showing the 2 lots being conjoined into one. That retracement plat goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their recommendation before coming to the City Commission for your ultimate consideration. So that's issue number 1. And so I believe the applicant or the requester here is looking for some type of a City Commission blessing in order to give staff the authority to sign off on to issue a building permit prior to that lot merger taking place. And then I think issue number 2 is similar to an item earlier on the agenda here, is the house is located within 100 feet of the established riverbank. The proposed addition, it's my understanding, is partially within 100 feet of the established riverbank. And so that is another factor that would need to be addressed prior to the city issuing a building permit for the proposed addition. So that's a high-level summary. Again, I'm here to answer any additional questions that you may have.
Commissioners? Mr. Anderson, you have something additional?
Not this time.
Commissioner George?
Yeah, I was just, for me, like, I don't have any issue with building over the lot line. It would be the same thing, like we said with that earlier item, and I guess for me to feel comfortable with that, they'd almost have to do the same thing, like if they got approval for that they need some sort of letter, they wouldn't sue the city if something happened to that riverbank or something similar to what we just voted on.
Has construction started?
No, I believe only a demolition.
And they can move it back to within the 100-foot control line.
They have
That's
to.
my thought. No construction started on the new part. Why should we give them a variance? Nothing started yet.
11 feet.
This is a little bit different.
So I'm assuming that they're going to try and build on or attach it to the part of the old facility. So by moving it,
But if they're tearing down part of it and rebuilding, they could just make it within 100 feet of that, and we don't have to issue a variance. I mean, that's a thing that we could discuss. Nothing started.
thank you.
I guess the 11 feet, that could be asked if that's a possibility.
We have a representative of the builders here. Century Builders is here. Mr. Ben Koppelman. Could you address that question?
Thank you.
Specifically first for Commissioner Olson.
For the record, I'm Ben Koppelman with Vision Construction, and I'm assisting the owner in part of their project here. The area you see, if you can kind of say that bottom finger of the house, that's the addition is greatly tracing those same lines. So the property there was originally built without a normal foundation and has a lot of shifting problems from frost, not from the river, but from seasonal frost. And so I think at one time, maybe it was built as a garage, later finished off as living space. And the owner purchased the property back in 2006, purchased both lots. And that was long before the city came up with this 100-foot setback. They've had plans to replace that bottom finger, which is clearly deficient, whereas the rest of the house is not. I mean, yes, to Commissioner Olson's point, I mean, anything's possible, but for most people on the river, they wouldn't happen to have this bonus lot next to them. So they couldn't do like, let's do a long breezeway so we can be 20 feet further away or something. They wouldn't have those options. In fact, just doing it the way they want to do it, as close to the river as it would be, which by the way is really close, not very much closer than the existing building they're tearing down, portion they're tearing down, but they would, if they didn't own that other lot, they wouldn't even be able to be that close to that east line. So had they moved the extra 6, 8, 10 feet and didn't own the lot next door, they'd be screwed. So I think the city, as I recall, when they came through this process, and this was in the mid-2010s, I want to say maybe even late 2010s, when this new ordinance came in place, there was some uproar. I live down on the south side, and there was some uproar in some of those rural subdivisions where people live on the river predating the city. They're like, hold on a second, you want to come up with this new 100-foot rule? And maybe the engineering department will remember some of these conversations, and they're like, hold on. And the commission at the time, as I recall, some of the discussions were like, whoa, we're just trying to come up with reasonable rules for new buildings on river lots to make sure they don't fall in the river. Okay, everybody can agree to that. And the either assumption or information given was that there was essentially a grandfathering understanding for all those houses that were already built. And so I know that the engineering department is working on some ideas for updates to your ordinances that would probably make this process maybe less cumbersome. They're not quite there yet, much the same as I think they're working on some non-conforming building processes, which overlaps this discussion. They're not done with those yet. And so we wanted to just come up here and not lose most of this building season by going through this cumbersome process at great expense to the owners. I might point out that the soil a test that you guys have talked about to make sure that the soil can support the home, that isn't actually what they're asking for. They're not, when we build on a new lot and we go and do soil borings, we want to know what the density of the soil is, how big the footings need to be, is it going to sink in one corner, things like that. And they say, no, you got to dig deeper, put some new fill in, that sort of thing, and here's how you make it work. Well, they're asking for bank stabilization. So they're asking for a full geotechnical report from where the building is all the way to the river. And I got an estimate from only one out of probably 5 companies that could do this. Only one so far has been willing to even consider it. $20,000 in 2.5 months to decide if they can build almost in the exact same spot they are today. Now, they have not had any bank shifting there. They have no soil issues with those areas that are deep in the ground, and they have no summertime issues with this piece they're tearing off. So there isn't any logic that would suggest they have an issue. It's just a matter of that's what the black and white of the process says in a paragraph. The other thing with the ordinance that you have is it talks about a retracement plat, and it says the owner may go down the road. And one of the times I read it, I'm like, oh, we don't have to. That's just you may. And when I asked the planning director about that, he said, well, there's some stuff that was never platted in the city, and you may want to retrace the plat so you have a clear title later. I'm like, okay, but we don't have that problem. Good enough. We don't want to do it. Oh, well, you have to do it. When I says, well, then what's the may for? It should say shall if you mean you have to. So we went down the process, found out that there's really no difference. There's no ease in this retracement plat process. The only difference is planning and zoning doesn't ask for doesn't notice for public comment. Takes just as many meetings, just as many months, doesn't help the owner. So one of the things that I offered is, why don't we just bring it to the commission's attention so they can see a real life example of where the problems are. Somebody that moved to West Fargo from Fargo in 2006. 2 different ordinances that were passed 10 or more years after they moved here are hampering their plans and risking them losing an entire building season. And we can solve it with just a little common sense. Now, there was, Commissioner Olson, I think you had mentioned earlier, like, why don't we have a packet for this? And where's the background information? Why do we just get it right before the meeting? We actually fast-tracked the information for the retracement plat, and the only thing we didn't have on that document that I know that planning does have, maybe they weren't able to get it like computerized at the end of last week, but they have it. And so I assumed coming into this that you guys had 2 or 3 documents in front of you, and I was just going to bring you the distance off the river line because the city officials, well, and that's what I brought today, but the city officials weren't there till, I believe, Friday to market. And so I actually went there today using their marks, did all the string lining, figured out what all the points were, and brought that to you so we weren't guessing. But that was supposed to supplement what was already submitted through the city channels. It wasn't supposed to be, here's something brand new to consider at the last minute. I guess to be clear, what we're asking for, the lot merger process, we're following the what I believe is a little bit cumbersome retracement plat process. The only thing left to go on there is the setback from the river, and possibly just to double check the building placement. But I think that can be done very quickly now that the city's done that, probably in less than a week. And so we're asking that the staff be able to administratively move forward with that once they receive that, not have to put it on a planning and zoning commission meeting in probably July and get into late July or early August for the commission to look at it a second time. So that's our first request. The second request is that we be allowed to go through the application process with the building inspector and say, hey, does the building meet all the codes and so on and so forth, get that approval with the understanding that they can't get the CO for the property until the retracement plat's been completed through the planning department, which shouldn't be an issue because this building project will take 2-3 months to do. And essentially, I guess you could kind of say the third request is what we're talking about the setback from the river. Now, if you look at what I gave you today with the red line on the bottom, that little bump out, you can kind of see a window well on the bottom of that plan, and that little bump out, it's a 6-foot bump out. And that's essentially under the eave now. And that's the only portion of this building that would be closer to the river from where the existing building is. Everything else is further away. And so, and the owner, I think they just assumed that they were signing off on some document that said the city is not liable for the stability of their home if they allow that variance to occur. Whether it's a real formal variance or not, I think they are just assuming that that was something that has to be signed. So in a nutshell, that's the presentation. I can try to answer any of your questions, and thank you for your time.
Any additional questions, Mr. Koppelman?
I guess I maybe have both, so you're going from one request to 3 requests now. Is that what I just heard you say?
Well, I think the 2 requests were submitted with the request to be on the agenda. I think
You have that?
I think
Anything.
I think Mr. Nelson had sort of combined those in the written request to be on the agenda, submitted through the portal online. I can't speak to where that went. I think, wherever you received that, correct?
No.
I can speak to that.
Go ahead. I believe Mr. Mickelson had submitted that online and has an email record of it. I don't know that we have it printed to provide, but.
Well, we have nothing. And then second, before you move on, Mr. Scott, I don't recall us changing that setback. Do you? In 2010 or whatever Mr. Koppelman's talking about? I don't remember that. Do you?
Well, I don't recall exactly when the 100-foot setback requirement was established. Well, before that, there were some changes and updates to the ordinances in.
But we never touched the setback, did we? The 100-foot setback?
100 foot from a riverbank has been in place for some time. I would have
So
to.
what are you referring to, Mr. Koppelman?
Well, I'm referring to after the 2005 or 2006 timeframe that the change was made. I don't believe the ordinance, that 100-foot predates
I was
that.
here, and I don't recall ever changing. We did some changes, but I don't recall doing it to the setback.
I guess I can't speak for the year.
Well, we can research that. Mr. Nelson, you were going to step to the podium with regard to the submittals as to whether or not we have those in hand, please.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just to clarify, there were 2 different submittals that were discussed with Mr. Koppelman. The first was in relation to or one of them was in relation to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And so to get on the Planning and Zoning Commission for the month of July, our application deadline was just this past Friday. And so Mr. Koppelman has been working with his surveyor to get a retracement plat to us, which he did submit on Friday. And so all that shows is just the 2 lots merged into one on a draft plat. So that may be what's being referenced in terms of the submittal. The other submittal that was discussed was the submittal for the City Commission meeting. And so originally I had instructed him to fill out get on the agenda form on their website. But I think maybe some miscommunication on my part in terms of when the deadline is for a citizen to request to be on the agenda. Long story short, I think Commissioner Anderson stepped in and as a commissioner offered to get this item on the agenda as a commissioner. And so that's how this item became on the commission meeting tonight. And so I want to make sure there's a distinction between those 2 different application discussions.
And the next planning and commission meeting is next Tuesday?
It's the second Tuesday in July, and so it's.
July.
Yep,
excuse me.
July.
Okay. Commissioner George?
I'll just say, my opinion on this is, they're talking about losing a building season. I mean, the second week in July is getting out there a bit. And, they're coming to us with a special request. We're only looking at 6 feet closer to the river than the current structure is what I see. It's their property. If they want to sign off that it's not the city's fault, if they have something or sloughing or issues, I feel like it's their property and they should be able to do it. That's where I'm at on this. I don't see why we need to roll them through the ringer and make it harder or push it back on time. That's part of why we're here is to help people out and make this happen for them. That's my thoughts.
Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you, but I'm a little confused, Commissioner George. They're asking for 3 feet, not just the 1, right?
I'm okay with it.
Do you know what the other 2 are?
So they want them across property lines, I know is one, building this closer, and then I think not going to planning and zoning. Was that the 3?
Commissioner George, if I can answer that. So the piece of the lot merger and the piece of the being able to start the building permit process while that lot merger continues. Those were the two that were submitted through the portal to be on the city commission agenda. I think in our understanding of our submitting them, we were asking them to both be on this agenda. I think in Mr. Nelson's understanding, he was understanding that we wanted to not have to come back to the commission later on the merger, but that it would still go to planning and zoning, and I have no issue with that piece, so that's why there's some confusion over 1 versus 2. The 6 feet closer, we were not aware of where the line was until they came in with a line that, quite honestly, is really surprising when you see where the line is. If you were out on the site, you would never, if I said, go point to where you think the line is, you'd never believe the line was that far away from the river. And so that's where that third issue just popped up when they finally came out Friday and said, oh, by the way, you know, with this line we're going to paint, a good chunk of your house is too close to the river. And as a matter of fact, the main part that has a good foundation is only 76 feet off the river. The portion you're tearing down is, this is around 90 feet off the river. And so it wasn't until today then that I could actually put that information on paper. And so I apologize for throwing a third item at you. Had the information been available to us, we would have provided that earlier.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me. Mr. John Shockley, City Attorney, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. A couple things to note, just as I'm hearing the discussion. The first is you could certainly authorize pursuant to an agreement somebody to build at risk, but you can't excuse going through the plating approval process. They would still have to come back to the city commission. There's a North Dakota case law that says you can't agree to essentially give up your authority as a city commission to approve zoning action. So you could certainly authorize them to go ahead, start construction, take the risk that they go through the plating process and you as a city commission decide later, no, you're not going to approve the plat. I think probably a pretty low risk, but you just can't give up that right to zone it. The second is with the other variances within the lot building control line, and completely understand what you want, whatever the commission wants to do, you can make that decision, but with the other variances that we've granted, we have required the soils study to be completed. The city is, and in the interest of the city has had to buy out properties that are along the river, and a lot of times people come back and they'll sell to a subsequent lot owner later on, and that house has damage from the river, and so it's not unheard of that as a city, we've ended up buying out houses because of those issues. And so you may want to consider requiring as part of an agreement that they would get a soils, some type of soils requirement to complete the construction. I'm not trying to load up additional requirements, but looking at protecting the interests of the city, there is good reason to have the soil survey completed.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Anyone else? Mr. Nelson, would you step to the podium, please? So do you understand everything that we've been discussing here and where the process is? So the best recommendation that you would make is that this entity have come back in July, second Tuesday in July, with any additional information that we would require, and some clarifications on some of the existing municipal codes that we have with regard to variance and process. Is that a correct summary, Mr. Shockley?
At this time, I don't have a recommendation because I'm still kind of processing what would be needed in an agreement with them. I'd probably defer to Aaron from a zoning perspective for that department as to what you'd recommend for next action.
Yeah, I can touch on that. So in summary, there's two different applications that would typically be required in a situation like this. The first would be the retracement plat, which is relatively straightforward. The second would be the request for the variance in order to reduce the building control line from 100 feet down to whatever the actual on-the-ground measurement is. And so, just like the item earlier tonight, the ordinance requires that a soils analysis be submitted to confirm that there is no riverbank stabilization concerns and that the land can support the proposed structure. That typically is reviewed at Planning and Zoning with a public hearing prior to coming to City Commission. And so those, I think, is my understanding is kind of what's being requested to be kind of.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Simmons?
Thank you. I don't feel that comfortable with all the options, so I'm gonna make a motion. Would it be better for the individuals to table it for 2 weeks and get everything, or I think we should send it through P&Z myself, but I'm open to that. Mr. Shockley, would it be better to go back to go through P&Z? We have to go through them anyway, right?
Right.
So I'll make a motion that we send this back to Planning and Zoning. Let them,
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Anderson, this is your line item. Any additional comments, thoughts?
Not at this time.
All right, thank you, sir.
So
Mr. Nelson?
just one question on clarification. So in sending it to Planning and Zoning, is the intent to still require the soils analysis, or is this going to Planning and Zoning in a similar type request in order to similar request?
That's a great question, and I'm going to ask you to consult with our city attorney on that, if that's been a prerequisite or a requirement all through the variance process. So we'll leave that to your review and Mr. Shockley's legal expertise on that.
Great. Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Let the record show that the motion passed. Item number 9 is a salary update, study update. We have Sarah Goshovic is to speak this evening. Human Resources Manager for the City of West Fargo. And Mr. Scott, City Administrator. Please, welcome.
Thank you, Commission President and Commissioners. So today we have the results from the 2023 salary survey for us all to go through, and we would like to present those to you now with some options for the commissions to thankfully and maybe possibly wrap it up with the commissioners that started the survey. So I just have a short presentation for you to go through those options and what that looks like, and then I would take any questions from you from there. So again, this is the 2023 salary survey. So how did we get to 2024? There was some things that happened. So towards the end of 2022 is when the commission approved to have the salary survey put on to the budget. Obviously then my predecessor began in January of 2023 working with MRA, who was contracted to do the salary survey in order to get that project started. There was a gap when my predecessor left until I came in and revamped the project again, or reignited, if you will, the project in September of 2023. The results from that project came back to us. The hard data came back in May of 2024, and that brings us to today with those results and the recommendations for implementation for the City Commission to consider. Because I know that everybody is looking for the end game, here's the spoiler alert. To make all the changes recommended by MRA and myself, as well as Mr. Scott, it would take $223,028. This represents only a 1.14% overall increase to the salaries that were included in the study. And so I'll point out that those salaries were only those for employees that were in position as of January 1, 2024. The potential salary savings, due to the grade reductions would be approximately $110,151. The potential net annual cost then would be $112,877, which represents a net increase of the surveyed salaries of 0.57%. Go ahead.
Your grade reductions of $110,151 annually. How does that affect existing personnel within the community?
That's a great question. So that is a potential savings, and because there are people that can come, people that would go, things of that sort. So how that affects people right now is we would ask for any of those positions that had a salary grade reduction to have that reduction done as of January 1, 2025. The reason for this is because depending on what commission decides to do with employee salaries could change where they would fall on that next line item, and we want to make sure that we are as fair to those folks as possible. Note that nobody had more than a single grade salary reduction, so it is not like somebody's going from a grade 16 to a grade 5. It's nothing of that extreme.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, quick overview then. There were 3 things that were really looked at in this project. One was a market appropriateness of our current ranges. This literally took the ranges and said, hey, do these ranges work according to what the market says? And do they need to be adjusted according to competitiveness or area competitors? The second one was a rescoring. MRA referred to this as job evaluations, but when talking with department heads, there was confusion between what was the difference between a job evaluation and market appropriateness, and so I just called it rescoring. And that is where we took a certain number of positions and we had MRA reevaluate whether or not, or what that score should be on them, and placed them back into the grading scale from there. And then the last thing that was looked at was time in current position. This was to make sure that our people were aligning with the steps that they should be on based on the amount of time that they had been in their current position. So our data sources for all of those, it was determined by Commission back in 2022 to keep the cost down of that we would use the 2022 City of Fargo survey data, as well as multiple published annual surveys from the MRA library. The data was then aged to January 1 of 2024, and that is a common practice when doing salary surveys for any information if you don't have a fresh one. The City of Fargo has not done a salary survey as of 2020 or since 2022, and so that would be the most recent information that we had. Given that theirs was a custom survey, it did include a lot of the cities in the region that we would have compared ourselves to anyhow, so we aged the data appropriately. From there, the findings. For our ranges, using the midpoint of 12% as the accepted deviation, we found that making that between 88% and 112% of market. We found that 81% of positions were within market, so there was nothing wrong with them. 3% of positions were below market, meaning that they needed to be adjusted up. 9% of positions were above market, so they needed to be brought down. And then 7% of positions had insufficient data. And so most of those were found within our library, in case you want to ask. And so we found comparative data by quite literally calling our sister cities and asking them, what do you guys call this, or what person does this job, and working our way through that part. For the scoring, so those specific positions that were sent back to MRA to be put against the matrix, there was scoring done for 26 positions, so not all of them. To determine which positions would have that done, it was either at the supervisor's request due to the restructuring that was done prior to January 1st of 24, or due to significant changes in the job description, and therefore I put them forward myself, stating that there was enough change that we wanted to make sure we were still on track with where that scoring was coming. From there, of those 26 positions, 2 were found to be higher in grade, 2 were found to be lower in grade, and 22 of them were found to be just fine. So that's how that one went along. The methodology for those changes in grade, just to give you a couple of examples, if the grade went up or down either way, people were moved to the next closest step without cutting pay. So I gave you a couple examples. If an employee was a grade 7 step D and was recommended for an increase in grade, they would move to a grade 8 step B, i.e. it is not a direct drop down the salary structure, so they don't go from a 7D to an 8D. They go to the next step closest to what a 7D was, making it, that's 8B. If it was going the other way, that they were in for a decrease, going from a grade 7D again, and decrease in grade, they would be moved to a grade 6G. Again, this wouldn't happen until January 1 of 25, because that could actually fluctuate a little bit as to whether they would be an E, an F, or a G, depending on where salaries go for that.
My question is, when you're analyzing the grades, okay, was that done strictly through the HR department or with the supervisors and HR combined? So to make sure that you have a good understanding of what their position is and if there's additional responsibilities that they have that might affect your judgment on the grade from a grade 7 to a grade 6 or a grade 7 to a grade 8. So was the supervisors involved in this also?
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner President Dardis, and yes, that's the simple answer. So from the get-go, I don't claim to know what everybody does in this city. I couldn't even if I tried. And so I had the department heads were responsible for sending in all of their job descriptions, identifying any changes to those job descriptions that needed to happen. From there, I quite literally read them all, although I still couldn't tell you what everybody does after that. But I read them all, and if there were minor changes or even some grammatical corrections that I thought were necessary, I would have the department head agree whether or not that was part of it. When we did get the data back, I met with each department head to go over their individual departments and say, these are some of the comparatives that they're using, because just because you call it an apple does not necessarily mean it's an apple in the realm of salary surveys. And so we wanted to make sure we were in fact comparing apples to apples and not, somebody disguised off as a pear. And so I had the department heads meet with me one-on-one to go through those. They identified if there were any comparatives that they found were not relevant, and we took that feedback back to MRA and had them adjust the data. Sometimes that made things go up, sometimes it made things go down. It all just kind of depended on where that went. But yes, they have been an integral part of this process.
Very good, thank you.
So then the findings for the time and position, this was using the original assignment date, and I want to make that statement very clear that it is based off the assignment date, not the hire date. As people move through their positions, their pay ranges and salaries would have been adjusted according to those positions and promotions, and so this is based off of their assignment date. The findings for that of the 289 employees that were included in the survey, 275 of those employees were on the correct step. Pretty easy. There were, however, 14 employees that were behind in step, and just note that 13 out of those 14 were from our police department, meaning our people were just behind in time. So where we had that compression of time, we did the following. We identified them for a time compression change. They were identified by looking at, again, their current time and their current position compared to the current step. If they were found to be wrong, we adjusted them accordingly. However, in this one, nobody went down. If they, through the process of promotion and our policy that we currently have that says that requires at least a 5% increase, so on and so forth, were above the step that they would have been on based on time, we did not move them back in time because we don't want to violate our own policy of the 5%. However, if they were behind in time, we would move them up to what would be the appropriate step for how long they have been in that current position. Nobody, just so that is out there as well, nobody was given a grade and a time adjustment. It was one or the other, depending on what was happening with your position. So the recommendations then, there were 84 people found to be out of sync with the findings from MRA. 14, as I said, were due to a compression of time. They make up approximately $90,000 of the change. 63 were caused by a change in the grade recommendation, and they made up $132,862. And then there were 7 that are recommended for grade reductions. And as I said, my recommendation would be that we make those with the January 1 calendar change so that we can make sure that we're moving our people appropriately and also being as fair to them as possible. To put it into a beautiful little picture, these are the affected versus not affected employees. Again, going off of that 289 people that we started with as of January 1. So today we currently have approximately 312-ish employees. We obviously have more people, but they are not in this survey because they were not here as of the date of the data as well as the positions January 1. So of those 289, 71%, if you want to round there, nothing's happening. They're going to continue on with their day. Life is going to be fine. Approximately 2.5% of people will see a grade reduction, again, with that recommendation of that not happening until January 1 of 25. 22% would see a grade increase, and then the time compression is approximately 5%. So that just puts it into a picture format for you. So the bottom line, again, going back to that second slide that we brought up for you, the total annual cost to make all of the recommended adjustments would be $223,028. Again, that's 1.14% increase to the salaries that were included in the survey. Salary savings due to those grade reductions, potential salary survey savings, $110,151. And then the net would be an increase of $112,877, or 0.57% of the salaries that were included in the survey. To this end, I have two options of asks of you. The first option would be to make all of the changes except for the grade reductions, or to make that change effective as of January 1, but to make the rest of them as of January 7th of 2024, to coincide with the data date as well as payroll. That's why it's not January 1. Because then we would have to also adjust everybody's W-2s, and I don't think anybody really wants us to go that far. So January 7th makes it so that we don't have to do that. It also recognizes that this survey was meant to be done a year ago. It should have been June of 23 that somebody was standing here to make this proposal, but just due to other things, it didn't happen until today, and so the employees have waited long enough. The total cost of this option, obviously, again, is $223,028. Option 2 would be to make all of the changes except the grade reductions, again, to make them effective as of 6/9 of 24. It's again to coincide with the pay period beginning. And the total cost for that one, because it would be effective just going forward, there would be nothing as far as a backwards look, would be $120,092. The employees would see this particular change on their 6/28 paycheck, which is the next one that they would get. So we would have some paperwork to get done. With that, I stand for any questions. I do know that at the bottom, we do have the funding recommendation, which I will leave to Mr. Scott.
Commissioner Olson.
I don't know if it's questions or more comments, but before Sarah and before Dustin, I had heard of department heads wanting to have a certain employee's position rescored. So can that happen at any given time? Or are we going to set this is the grade for the year, and then we're going to look at it a year from now, rather than just at the drop of a hat, Joe Blow is doing a great job, I want him rescored so he can get a raise, and I don't have to document anything because MRA says this is what it should be. So are we going to set something like that in policy so it can't just be done at the drop of a hat?
I can answer that one if you'd like. I think the department heads are, for one, sick of hearing me say that the grade is the position, the step is the person. So you would not change the grade based on that person. You would only change the step, potentially, and that does have requirements as far as how they do that. To date, the way that I have been working with our department heads is if they say, hey, I think this one is out of sync, then I am using the matrix that MRA has provided and seeing where I come up with it, as far as putting it against that matrix and does it come close. If it's only a point or two off, it's highly likely that's not going to make a grade change. However, sometimes, depending on the job data update or the job description update, it might actually create quite a few points. And so if it changes according to my analysis against their matrix, so the same exact one that they're going to use, I then forward it to MRA and have them do that. I'll tell you that probably 90% of them don't make it past my desk, simply because it's maybe a point or two, and so then it becomes let's look at this at the beginning of the year as we go to do those things again.
Because having worked in the federal government and worked under a grading system and all that, you had to have your performance evaluations, all that good stuff in place, in order, meet certain things, and then once that happens, on your anniversary date of your hire is when it became effective, not whenever you wanted it to happen. So
Yeah.
that's what I hope we can get to, so there's some structure and budgeting and all that, because it's all.
Yeah,
seems
and
to
those
change.
processes really do need to be, hammered out, if you will, and we're hoping to do that in the very near future to prevent having a salary survey
Sure.
come back like this.
Thank you.
Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you. You did leave out option number 3, though, Sarah, which is do nothing, correct?
You could, you absolutely can
So
do
we
that,
have-
that is of your
just-
choice.
That's a deal, but I just still like to at least feel we have a decision in this to make.
That one didn't require me to find an exact paycheck date or amount, so I just left it off my slide.
Okay.
I would remind the commission that this discussion has been ongoing for extended period of time, number of years. Started back in 2023. So with all due respect to your comments, Commissioner Simmons, I don't think option number 3 is
Is,
it's not
Viable?
in my portfolio.
Well-
You can do what you want, but
Well, it's this final
it-
meeting.
this has, some of these employees, it has been put off.
I absolutely understand that, Mayor. I was just saying that we have the final decision.
Yeah, I got you.
That was my point.
This is your last meeting. You can say any dang thing
That was
you
my
want.
point. Can I take over the meeting here?
Yeah, what am I gonna do, fire you?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So.
I don't think I have a form for that one.
So we have option 1 and we have option 2. Obviously, option 1 does address a retro due to the point that I was making about this discussion started in early 2023 that we were going to have this completed. It did not get completed, so the retro pay through 6/22/24 is $102,936. And to me, that's the real question as to what we do here. So, Mr. Scott, you look like you'd like to make a comment. Here he comes. Mr. Dustin Scott, City Administrator for our community.
Well, thank you for the invitation up here. Yes, I'm eager to, commend Sarah and her hard work. Picking up where this left off was not an easy task. New to the city, trying to understand all of the different positions, and amongst many other projects, she was able to get this to the finish line and in front of this commission. And as she stated when she started this meeting, it's important that the commission that started this end this. And so we're just, again, excited for the opportunity and eagerly awaiting your decision. And I also would like to share just a brief report on where we sit today with our salary expenses. As you know, we are going to be bringing forward quarterly reports. I'm a little bit early on the second quarter report, but I did run it as of today. It looks like the majority of our departments are tracking around 40% of expenditure. So finishing through halfway the year, we're less than half of our budgeted expenses relating to salaries. And so as you do consider this options 1 and 2, understand that we are tracking underneath budget. And as the last bullet point there does indicate, my recommendation is to fund this through our reserves. So with that, I would entertain any questions and otherwise turn the floor back over to Ms. Kosovich.
Mr. George has a question.
I guess it's just really more of a comment. I know this recent election cycle, employee retention was a topic of conversation. So I feel as though we need to take care of our staff. I think the better option would be option 1. I'll just put that out there.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, even though my comment was made only for the reason we get the vote, Commissioner, so you
I
know
got
that.
it. I got it.
I agree, especially because I know firsthand some of the PD, the clerical people and stuff are way underpaid. So I'd make a motion to go with option number 1.
We have a motion to go with option number 1. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George, second. Been moved and seconded to approve option number 1 for an effective date of 1/7/2024 to coincide with the data date and the payroll. That being said, is there any further discussion?
Just for clarification, that it will have to do retroactive pay from when?
6/22/20.
No, it's
No,
through.
excuse me.
At what time do
Through.
we start it?
1/7.
So the reason that there are 2 dates as to when the employees would see that is because to do the retro pay is literally twice as much paperwork, and so to have a little pity on my own staff, I went with the 7/12 date to have that seen on employee paycheck. So the retro would be January 7th, 2024 through July 3rd, I might have that date wrong, I'm trying to see the payroll picture in my head, through July 3rd. And then so from the July 3rd paycheck going forward, would just go into the normal.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? The motion is to approve option number 1. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. I too got a detailed update on this when it was going to be brought forward. And my thanks and congratulations on your department and the work that they did on this.
Thank you.
It is not an easy task when you're working with grades and steps and all of the above. So thank you for
I'm
that.
pretty sure I broke my computer, so thanks.
Thank you. Next order of business, we're going to call on our city administrator's report, Mr. Scott.
Thank you again, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. Well, it's a bit bittersweet here. I'm giving my last administrator's report in front of Commissioners Simmons and George, and I just want to start off by saying I very much appreciate all the time and work I've done with you both, and for you, Mark, to help educate me on how all of this, all the city stuff works over the last 15 years. It's been greatly appreciated and an honor to work with you. So,
Thank you.
and with that, I'll start with a brief update on our move to the new City Hall location, which again is at 2515 6th Street East. I want to start by saying, don't enter that into your Apple Maps. That is taking you to Charleswood. I'll say that again. If you enter that address into your Apple Maps, that will take you to Charleswood. It's the very last block on 6th Street East that is in West Fargo. It's actually located in Charleswood and on 20th Street. So we're working to have them change that, but it might take some weeks. But aside from that particular issue, Google Maps is working just fine, so you can get there through that platform. We have moved all of our staff with the exception of a few. Emily, myself, Christy, our part-time admin help, and Merdardis. So tomorrow is our day to get over there, and that will at least finalize all the staff. We will all be working from that location. It will still take some weeks and possibly longer to get all of the files, all the bookshelves, all the other types of things over there so that we are completely out of this building. But I can't thank enough our building and grounds staff, Al, Jimmy, Les. They have done a lot of heavy lifting in moving all of the desks and all the furniture and all of the things that have been going over there, as well as staff, taking the extra time, coming in on weekends and at nights to move their stuff over there. It has saved the city a lot of money in avoiding professional moving help. So a big thank you to our staff. Any questions on the move over to our new location? All right, the next one, an update on our police department expansion. I'll give a brief introduction here and then turn it over to Chief Nielsen. I'll do the part that I will be thankful that you're sitting in your chairs for. So as you know, we've been working with our architectural consultant to develop conceptual designs. We have really come to the conclusion of that effort, and they shared with us a very early rough cost estimate. And again, brace yourselves, it was upwards over $50 million to expand this facility, which really was replacing a lot of the old building and building new and making sure that we had enough space to last for the next 50 years. So, but with that came then Chief Nielsen decided to ponder that a little bit in his backyard and come up with, I think, a much better alternative here to move forward with. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Nielsen.
Evening, Chief.
Good evening, Commission President Dardis, fellow commissioners. Again, thanks to Mr. Scott for coming up and delivering the news, so I didn't have to actually deliver it to you. But I think it was a couple of weeks ago when we got this proposal. Myself and Mr. Scott got together and started thinking about a few things and thinking about what's the best interest of the city, the best interest of the community. And at that time, it was, I started to think of what the police department could do without having to, raise taxes to move further along with this type of project. I don't believe it's a good idea at this point to move forward with $50 million on this property and this project. So as I thought about this, I think the most logical decision would be to move some of the police department's staff into some vacant property that's on this, in this building, I should say. And when I say that, one of the things that I would like to look at is possibly moving like our training division out of the police department and moving it into what we'd probably call like our west wing, which would be behind the doors over here, and moving them into the finance area. And then as I got to thinking about it, I thought that a good idea would be to move our detective bureau, that stations 9 people with a sergeant, and move them into the building inspections. It has a big facility or a big open spot in there with some repurposed cubicles that we could use, an office in there where Mark House used to seat, and that could be where our sergeant moves into. With that, there's going to be some possible costs. Some of the main things that we talked about initially were how the police department's out of space, how the police department doesn't have adequate enough lockers, storage facilities, and so on. And with this expansion into that area gives us the time being, and gives us some opportunity to create some other areas, some spacing, some storage, some area where we could put in different staff members. With that, I believe that we, like I said, are going to have to ask for some funding for that. What the funding would be it would be something that I'd probably bring up Mr. Scott to bring out where that would come from and what that is. But this would allow us as the police department to not burden the city any further and ask for rates increase on property taxes or anything. It would allow us the opportunity to move into that space, and then if something comes available that makes more sense down the road in a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that may be, is to then come in front of to pump money into this place when maybe this is not the long-term solution for the police department. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
So, Chief, we would use public safety sales tax if we were to give you the funding, correct?
Correct.
Take it out of that one, which is what it was designed exactly for. So are you going to tell us how much you want, or are you going to have Mr. Scott do that?
Well, since he delivered
Don't
the
scare us.
news, I think I'll let him continue with the funding news.
Okay.
Any further questions for me?
Commissioners, questions for the chief? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioners, so in talking with Chief Nielsen, really repurposing this old space makes a lot of sense for the short term. I do want to stress that this isn't meant to be a long-term solution by any means. As the forensic study showed us a couple years ago, this building is a bit of a Frankenstein itself and is on its last leg. So, but all that said, right now what Chief Nielsen is looking at in terms of funding is potentially up to $200,000 to $250,000, and that will renovate some of these spaces and allow them to breathe a little bit, if you will, as we continue to keep our eyes and ears open for potential long-term solutions. So, like Commissioner Simmons said, we do have the public safety sales tax. It is healthy, and we feel that $200,000 to $250,000 could be funded through that. I would only caution that with an old building like this, we just don't know how long it will be before something major happens, and if and when that does happen, we'll be in front of you and try to figure out how to deal with it at that time. So specifically, I'd like to request $250,000 of public safety sales tax to be allocated for renovations for the existing site for the police expansion. Thank you.
Commissioners? Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. Mr. Scott and Chief, I think that you've come up with a great idea to save money. There's no question. And I really appreciate that as a commissioner that you're looking at saving that money. I definitely think, that's what the sales tax is for. Not only that, but, hopefully a couple of years, let's cross our fingers, that the interest rates on the bonds go down. And that will definitely help. That'll make up for some of this $250 without a doubt. So I'd make a motion to approve this.
I have a motion to approve the police department expansion update as outlined by Chief Nielsen this evening, up to $250,000. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Again, we have a motion and a second to allow $250,000 to be spent towards the police department's expansion, and those dollars are to come from the police and fire sales tax. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Thank you, Chief Nielsen. Continue, Mr. Scott, with your update.
Thank you. So last update I have for you tonight is on the Senior Director of Administrative Services position. We held interviews today with 3 finalists, and we think they went very well. Where the group decided on is to move into another round of evaluations, with 2 of those 3 finalists. One of those 2 finalists is our own internal candidate, Nick Lee, and the other one resides in Florida. So we would like to bring her up, conduct some interactions with staff and get some feedback with staff on whom they would like to see fill this position. So where we're at is reaching out to those 2 candidates and seeing what availability they would have next week. The goal would be to complete everything next week and come before the commission on July 1st with a recommendation, but we'll see how the scheduling goes. So any questions on where we're at with that process?
Let's see, any questions?
Very good.
Anything additional for us?
Nope, I'd just, again, conclude by thanking Commissioners Simmons and George for their service, and look forward to continuing to hear from you into the future. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone? Does any commissioner have anything that they'd like to bring forward at this time? Non-agenda item? Does any staff member have anything that they'd like to bring forward this time? I have one item. At our last city commission meeting, we had some great residents of the city of West Fargo that were participating in the meeting and offered testimony and the like. And at one point in the meeting, there was cheering and clapping, and I reacted inappropriately. I reacted very quickly, and that's part of my training and participating in parliamentary procedure rules and regulations since I've been 14 years old. So to the people of Rivers Bend, I would like to apologize for that behavior. But I want to make something very clear, that we will not tolerate any booing if anybody is testifying either. So reactions in the commission meeting, we're in a very professional environment, and I will always stand by that conviction while I have the great honor and privilege to serve as mayor. But cheering and clapping or booing will not be allowed in the commission chambers. We're not going to go to where some other city commissions have gone in the area. And I would hope that my fellow commissioners would support us in that, and our newly elected commissioners would. Before we end the evening, I would again like to call on Mr. Hanson, Mr. Nelson, and Mr. Anvik to make sure that our commissioners-elect have all the pertinent data that was presented this evening. It's critically important that when they hit the ground running on July 1st, that they understand the water rates, and they understand the sewage adjustments that we're considering, as well as Mrs. Goshovic as well on your salary study. If you'd make sure that they have everything at their disposal, please. Again, We're going to change things up a little tonight. Commissioner Simmons.
Move to adjourn.
But before we do that, I would like to personally thank Commissioner George and Commissioner Simmons for your roles that you've played for the city of West Fargo. Commissioner George, it's been a pleasure to get to know you. Commissioner Simmons, you and I have been friends for a very long time. We've both been around a very long time. So way before we joined each other as commissioners. So to the both of you, thank you for your service to our community. Our community is definitely better because of what you two have contributed. So thank you for that. So this evening, Commissioner Simmons.
Move to adjourn?
Commissioner George.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much. Yeah. We're adjourned so we can clap. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor. Enjoy.